Mr Deputy Speaker. I hope I can complete my speech before rain stops play. And I think there's probably some kind of symbol about how many people view how broken Parliament is going on there. But let's return to the matter in hand. And I want to congratulate the member for Aberdeen South on securing this debate. It's clear this issue has caused much distress, brutally so at times. And of course it's the case that if tax is due, then it should be collected. And without the ability to raise funds for taxation, our public services will obviously grind to a halt. But where my concern, and indeed many other honourable members' concerns, lies in the way this loan charge and the recovery of it has been handled to date. It does raise for me questions about whether HMRC can say in all honesty that each individual case is being looked at properly before the menacing letters are sent out. I want to make it absolutely clear, if following due process it is determined that money is owed, that it should be recovered in a fair, consistent and reasonable manner. However, what I've heard does raise questions about the capacity of HMRC to deal with these issues properly. So I previously raised the issue of my constituent, Mr Crook, when we debated the matter in Westminster Hall back in November, and I recounted the 6 times he had contacted HMRC about his potential liability without any response. And I explained the immense anxiety he was feeling because he wasn't getting any answers and he feared bankruptcy. And since my involvement, there have been a response from HMRC, and I'm sure it was entirely coincidental that it came the week after the Westminster Hall debate. And I wish I could say that somehow we've managed to reach a happy ending there. But we've had tales from them of spam boxes, deleted emails, and the wonderful phrase that my constituents' request will be progressed within the normal timescales. Yet here we are, 360 days after my constituent registered his interest with HMRC, and still no agreement has been reached. And he isn't the only one in this position, so I repeat the question I raised back in November. Does the Department consider they have sufficient resources to deal with this issue?
Well, I will.
I
have an honourable member for giving words. I took a constituent called Jeff, who's lived by the rules and played by the rules, and certainly submitted tax returns year in, year out, and yet he's suffering this injustice, this retrospective injustice.
Thank the honourable friend for his intervention. He's absolutely right. It's the retrospectivity of this that is really very difficult for people to reconcile with what they consider to be a fair and transparent process. In that regard, I have had constituents raise concerns that if they do manage to reach agreement with HMRC, then they will be required to sign a settlement document that stops them reclaiming money from HMRC if they are later judged against in a judicial review. The retrospectivity of this does sit very uncomfortably with me, but also I think the idea that the government will not be bound by future court decisions goes very much against the rule of law that we are used to in this country. And that's the wholly unsatisfactory situation we face at the moment. But I just want to go back to where we all started with this. My constituent tells me that having submitted his tax returns each year when he was working, they have never been queried.
A point of order, Sir William Cash.
I wonder what was going on. Is it hot air that's escaping from in here?
Somebody might say there's a leak in Parliament at the moment, so we'll take it from there. Justin Manners.
I'm sure many cabinet meetings have similar difficulties, Mr Deputy Speaker. So my constituent tells me that having submitted his tax returns each year when he was working, they have never been queried. He states that by doing this, HMRC have at the very least implicitly, or if not explicitly, accepted that any monies he received in the form of a loan were indeed just that. But it is the retrospective nature and long reach of this loan charge which is so hard for him to accept. I understand that it's been claimed that HMRC have always said that these arrangements were unacceptable, but I haven't seen anything prior to 2016 to suggest that was the case. And I wonder if, when responding, the Minister can advise whether in future I should be advising my constituents that they should no longer consider HRC responses to tax returns to be final, that they can be reopened at any point, and that any schemes registered with HMRC can in fact be overturned decades in the future. Can the Minister also advise whether any companies who made loans will be pursued for employer national insurance contributions as well? And what if the company is no longer trading? Will the employees' national insurance records be updated? I also just want to say a few words about the human cost of all this. HMRC has admitted in responses to FOI requests that no assessment was made of the likely number of taxpayer bankruptcies that will result from this charge. Yet the official HMRC statement says the government anticipates that...
No photographs. Okay, you're holding it up. Please.
I'll carry on. The HMRC statement says the government anticipates that some of these individuals will become insolvent as a result. This measure is not expected to have a material impact on family formation, stability or breakdown. And I find that statement unbelievable on two counts. The first is how little understanding and empathy there is for those who face bankruptcy. Anyone who has spent more than 5 minutes in the real world will know that individual insolvency has a massive impact on families. The other huge reservation I have about this is where it appears to be saying, on the one hand, it has not made an assessment on the number of bankruptcies, but it does claim that there will be some insolvencies. If people have to be made bankrupt, then I think we all are clear that something has gone terribly wrong. And finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, before we get the paddles out, I would like to ask the government to think about what kind of message this whole mess is sending out to entrepreneurs, the people the Conservative Party once used to consider the bedrock of their support. Under this government, those people are being left with the very distinct impression that HMRC are prioritising recovery over tax revenue over justice by targeting individuals rather than the promoters of the scheme, many of whom still enjoy generous contracts with government. They knew what they were doing but appear to have accepted no responsibility for the actions they face and face no consequences. And the suggestion that some public sector employers were insisting that the people paying the price now would only be employed if they agreed to accept the kind of contracts that HMRC are now declaring unlawful is an absolute outrage.
I'm going to suspend the sitting, and when we come back, the bells will ring 2 minutes before we restart. So the sitting is now suspended and no photographs.